COVID-19, the authorities in Nigeria are putting in place strategies to insulate the economy from crisis. Ease of payment are critical to national development in tax administration, says the FIRS. PPPRA opts for full deregulation of petroleum price, and crude oil spikes in best day ever. The program is Business Express and it is reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Leah Katun Babatunde. The Television White Space (TVWS) framework being developed by the Nigerian Communications Commission (NCC) under the ministry's supervision will enhance the delivery of the digital economy agenda of the federal government. President Muhammadu Buhari said this at an industry stakeholders forum on the guidelines of the use of TVWS in Nigeria.
We have taken advantage of digital technologies to ensure that Nigerians in distress are only a dial away from the relevant emergency response institutions in the country. This will go a long way in supporting our efforts to improve the security of lives and property.
Broadband is key to our economy. As we all know, the agenda of our boss centers around three things. Firstly, security. Secondly, economic development, and thirdly, fighting corruption. At the time that other sectors are in trouble because of coronavirus, digital sector comes on board to provide an alternative for all of us.
A sure alternative indeed. A tax system designed to facilitate voluntary compliance and seamless payment by taxpayers is critical to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) in Nigeria, and all the three tiers of government in the country should work towards achieving such a goal. The Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS), Muhammad Nami, who stated this in Lagos, encouraged stakeholders in the tax sector to avail themselves of seamless access to various information and communications technology-driven and web-based portals made available to them by the FIRS to pay their tax. The Association of Bureau de Change Operators of Nigeria, ABCON, has assured members of the public of continued dollar sale at the official price of 360 naira per dollar. In a statement, ABCON urged members of the public to patronize CBN licensed BDCs to purchase a dollar at the official price so as to avoid falling victim of currency hoarders and speculators who are creating an impression of a dollar scarcity in the economy. The association said there is no pressure in the foreign exchange market to warrant increase in the exchange rate above the official rate. Let's now see how much the Naira is exchanging for other international currencies. The International Air Transport Association IATA says Middle East and African airlines are in crisis with hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk from the coronavirus outbreak, calling for state intervention. IATA says the industry is facing a liquidity crisis and about 1 million jobs in the region are at risk and urge governments to provide state aid. The pandemic has cost Middle Eastern Airlines $7.2 billion in revenue as of March 11, with 16,000 flights cancelled since January. IATA also noted that African Airlines lost $4.4 billion after thousands of flights cancellations. Next week, the Monetary Policy Committee will be holding its second meeting for the year in what is viewed to be the most crucial for now as the coronavirus pandemic continues to affect economies globally. The Central Bank of Nigeria early this week announced a 50 billion naira fund to cushion the effect of the virus on the economy. Now, 2 days later, it added another 100 billion naira to the fund. This support is intended to go to local drug manufacturing, increased bed count in hospitals, funding intensive care, as well as training, laboratory testing, equipment, and research. Now, Governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, say the fund is to aid health authorities develop instant solutions and prepare for any major crisis ahead.
So what am I saying? That interest rate is already low anyway, but that by our activities and also the fact that we will continue to emphasize and place direct focus on the issue of the loan to deposit ratio, which sort of pushes the banks to lend, and that process of market competition for loans will naturally result in lower interest rate like we've seen today. So we're not afraid of that. We know what to do, and that will naturally happen. But the area where we felt that we needed to speak on very directly is that because of the drop in revenues to companies that may be or that will be directly impacted, adversely impacted upon by this COVID health crisis and economic crisis, because their revenues will drop, that we are saying if your loan was initially meant to be a, say, 3-year loan, where, for instance, you were paying on a monthly basis, say you took 10 million naira, you are paying, say, 100,000 naira as repayment, or a 3-year loan. We are saying we are going to grant the banks the dispensation where they can restructure your loan from 3 years to 6 years, such that in addition to low interest rates, what you'll be making in instrumental repayment of your loans would have dropped.
I'm now being joined by an economist, Dr. Tefa Abraham, to look at the efforts being put in place to insulate the economy from the coronavirus pandemic. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you very much, Leah. Happy to meet you again.
Okay, great. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, let's get your feeling about the funds being injected into the economy by the central bank 2 times this week.
First, it was 50 billion, and then later they added 100 billion, totaling 150 billion. So everything the CBN is doing is that the CBN is trying to see how much of monetary policy they can use to cushion the effect of the coronavirus slowdown on economic activity in Nigeria. But ideally, what we should be looking at is a combination of monetary policy and fiscal policy. So, but the CBN, who is the apex bank of the country, is already going ahead to employ any monetary policy measure they can use. The 150 billion in total was is being aimed by the CBN to help in local drug manufacturing, then in also providing funding intensive healthcare. These are areas that definitely needs additional funding given the way the virus is spreading and the need to prepare in case there's an outbreak beyond measure. And the CBN also accompanied that move by reducing interest rate, because the coronavirus effect on the economy is coming through the slowdown in demand channel. So reduction in interest rate is expected to stimulate increase in loanable funds, encourage production, and keep manufacturers and consumption activity ongoing.
So
Yes.
we've seen a lot of panic buying around town from day before yesterday. Yesterday it was something else. Into today, most of the shopping centers and markets are crowded. What are the factors responsible for this rush?
When it comes to economics and markets, markets will always respond to sentiment, investor sentiment, consumer sentiment. So the panic buying that we are seeing right now is as a result of this closure of airports to certain airlines, closure of certain schools, closure of restriction of size in terms of public gathering. All these things signals to the consumer out there that, look, it seems as if the economy is racing towards a halt. So the panic buying is for household to stock in case one day they say they want to close market and want to close public transport. So it will be important at this time for the National Orientation Agency, the Minister of Communication, and all government agencies actually to always be on air to explain to the public the steps being taken and the extent. Otherwise, if they allow people to interpret it by their own understanding, that's what will lead to panic buying. And let's not hope that this panic buying will not translate into panic withdrawal of deposits. Otherwise, it will serve again into panic withdrawal of deposit funds, thereby affecting the banking sector as well.
I was going to ask you, now we've seen rush to markets and all the buyings. Now, what does this imply for owners of SMEs that we've been canvassing to see grow over time? And part of the funds are released by the CBN, the modalities, of course, that will be reached by tomorrow with the Bankers Committee, is also to facilitate lending to the tune of about 1 trillion for MSMEs. What will be the next steps?
The measure by the CBN through the by giving out measures that will help SMEs stay in business, we have a counteracting effect on those doing panic buying and panic stocking, in the sense that it will give investors or entrepreneurs the hope to remain in business. That this is a time that the global economy is shaky, especially from the demand side, and businesses seem to be closing down. But the CBN is giving us signal to remain in business. So if investment decision will be sustained in the market. So those who are doing the panic buying, on the other hand, at least we still have goods and services to access. So the effect generally, if you put it up together, will be like a homogeneous effect of degree zero. In other words, people are panicking to buy, but investors are staying in business to produce. If CBN doesn't reduce interest rate and do what it is doing currently, the federal government in general, those who are doing panic buying will not even have those entrepreneurs on ground to buy from. So the CBN is just thinking very fast and accurate, in my opinion, to take any measure they can to curtail the effect on the economy. Okay,
now let's move to a manufacturing sector that we've seen a lot of effort being put in, because from the last trade statistics, it seems we're still importing more than we are exporting. Now that our borders are closed, how do you see this putting in a sort of buffer for that sector?
Okay, the idea now, good enough, President Muhammadu Buhari, in his wisdom, had earlier closed borders for security reasons anyway, but it seems as if the rest of the world now is learning from that his move to close border against coronavirus. So, but what Nigeria, because the best federal government can do is to create a conducive environment for investors to take advantage of. So border closure means fake rice, as at that time, is not coming in. So we should take advantage of domestic production. But what happened that time is that many domestic investors delayed their investment decision. So now that the border closure is coming from a global perspective, there'll be a rush for domestic, locally produced goods and services. So investors who took advantage that time to build capacity to produce locally, they will be having the shift from closure in border in terms of imports coming in, and the substitution effect will be coming from domestic supply. But again, not all goods can be produced within Nigeria overnight, like intermediate goods used for production of other goods, construction of bridge, heavy construction project. In those kind of, definitely the closure of restriction of trade in terms of import and export will affect the country in that level. But the best Nigeria can do now is to take advantage of any aspect of manufacturing that we have competitive advantage, or how would I say now, some comparative advantage over in our domestic economy to engage in active production.
Okay, still on comparative advantage.
Okay.
Some of the funds also will be, I mean, some of the steps are taken is going to reducing the burden of those who are already enjoying facilities from the central bank, mostly the anchor borrowers,
yes,
and what have you. So what should they be looking out for? I'm asking this question because most of those economies are closed, as we have agreed, and just like ours here. So there's really no cross-border trade. So what do you think the farming community in Nigeria should have right at their fingertips as soon as the borders open?
The farming community is a rural community located largely in Nigeria's rural sector. By gender classification, they are mostly women. Mostly, it's a female-dominated industry. They don't have access to credit, access to rural roads to bring their goods from the communities to the market. So for right now, for those in the farming community, it's important to remain in production. It's important to remain in farming. But unfortunately, don't forget, the coronavirus is making us forget insecurity that is already affecting the decision of local farmers to remain in farming. So these are things that we need to address collectively. But what is important right now for farmers to stay in business is access to credit. And that's what the CBN Anchors Borrower Program is trying to address. Because access to credit means they will be empowered to have access to inputs that they can use to stay in the farming business. But unfortunately, again, not just for Nigeria, but in sub-Saharan Africa, agriculture in general is still rain-fed. And because of this variation in rainfall cycle, long-term effect of climate change and things like that, farmers are struggling with desertification in one hand of the country, on the other hand, flood and low post-harvest issues and things like that. So, but in general, these farmers have local innovation that they can use to adapt to any challenge they are facing. But what is critical to them as input is access to credit. And that's what the Anchors Borrowers Program is all about. I think the National Assembly, on the other hand, are also now concerned in, if I may use the word that's on the media, to probe the dissemination of the Anchors Borrower Program. But what I would like to say in that context is that it's important to ensure that as the pool of Anchors Borrowers Program is being used to help farmers remain resilient, it's important to ensure that it's not the same set of farmers who have always been getting it as the ones who still get it. So I think that's the concern of the National Assembly, to ensure that... That
should take me to the next question now, data. Data.
Exactly.
We've been talking over time about how data has been a problem, a developmental problem for us in this part of the world. Now, this extension of credit lines, how would we see as a nation now that it works, considering this data crisis that I maybe, to call it a data crisis?
Exactly. I'll just take off from there as well. So I think what this National Assembly is trying to do is to ensure that those who have been getting the funds from the Access Anchors Borrower Program are not the same persons getting it. It should go round. So I think that's what the National Assembly is trying to achieve when the media says they want to probe. It's just to ensure that this thing goes wrong. And the CBN, I'm sure, they'll be already equipped with data to explain who gets what, how, and when. Then in terms of the data question, beyond the Anchors Borrowers Program, Nigerian Social Investment Program, Empower, and not just Empower, even if you go back to past government programs like UWIN and the rest, there's no effective database to actually say those who get those funds in UWIN? How are we sure that those who are benefiting from Empower now are not the same set of persons who benefited from UWIN, or who benefited from Shopee, or who benefited back in other programs? So what is critical in this area now? It's not the fault of these agencies anyway, but rather it's an issue that the Nigerian Communication Commission can help address. And luckily, this broadband plan that has just been released are part of the palliatives or the policy issues that need to be in place for Nigeria to address the data question. We need to know who are the people in the rural communities. The Empower project, who got it, when, how much? How are we sure now that the next one coming will not be going to the same persons? We need access to internet, access to data, our own data that we can own, because the focus of its administration is to ensure that it tackles economic growth, tackles insecurity, and then tackle corruption. This data issue that is clouded in information and communication technology, which the NCC has put forward the national broadband plan, will also help to address. So it's important to have a database to tell who gets what, when, and how.
So let's take this one in one sentence, and
Okay.
now we want to do some speculations.
Mm-hmm.
The MPC is meeting next week, precisely about 4 days from now. How would you see them keeping the rates? Do you see them tinkering with it? And to which direction?
Because of the corona effect, more than 50 countries already have cut down rates. And the CBN has already reduced lending rates. So the CBN will definitely situate its own policy actions within the global and domestic environment to see whether it should cut it further or leave it the way it is. But again, the coronavirus is coming through demand channel. Cutting those rates, what will motivate cutting further or keeping it the way it is how much investment decision has been taken to get new loans for new business because of the rate cuts. So CBN, I believe, will be monitoring the effect of the rate cut within the past 1 week to see what they will do. So my best imagination is that the rate will be reduced further, or they'll leave it the way it is for now for some time to see how things will play out before they decide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leah. Pleasure.
It's always a pleasure having you here. Gold prices rose on Friday after a fall in the previous session, but the metal was on track to post its second weekly drop due to a rush for cash amid the widening economic fallout from the coronavirus outbreak. And gradually, the greens are returning to the Nigerian capital market as the NSE All-Share Index for 28th March closed positive by a marginal percentage of 0.54% at 22,198.43 basis points, with market capitalization closing out the day at 11.5 trillion naira. 379 million shares valued at 3.4 billion naira exchanged hands in 4,669 deals. The banking sector was the most active, led by Zenith Bank, Fidelity and Guarantee Trust Bank. Top gainers were MTN Nigeria, CAP PLC and Julius Berger, while Presco, Flormill and Stanbic led the decliners. Australian stocks jumped 4% as China keeps loan prime rate unchanged. Over to Boss Abel.
Strategic measures are being taken to curb coronavirus pandemic on the global markets. European market bounced in early trading on Friday, 20th March, after a volatile week as central banks and governments around the world adopt a whatever it takes approach to mitigating the economic hit from the virus pandemic. Stocks in Asia also rose as China kept its loan prime rate unchanged. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index topped 3.97% as of its final hour of trading. Shanghai Composite finished 0.47% higher, while Nikkei dropped 1.04%. U.S. stock futures turned around early, pointing to opening gains after stock managed to mark a positive session. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures were up 188 points, implying a gain at the open on Friday. S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq Composite future also pointed to opening gains for the indices. Africa's stocks opened mixed, with Namibia's overall index and South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 posting gains, while Tunisia's Tunidex, Nairobi's All Share, and Ghana's GSE Composite declined.
Now, this is the point where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget to use the hashtag, and it is BizExp. We encourage you to wash your hands often under running water with a soap and stay safe out there. Business Express returns next week, Monday to be precise. I'm Leah Katung Baba today saying, do have a fun-filled weekend.